Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something pretty wild, a really dangerous new shift in how wars are fought. We're going to look at how Iran is getting ready to fight, not like a normal army, but like a whole country turned into one giant insurgency.
So, let's just jump right in with this question, because it really gets to the core of it. You know, normally we think of war as one country's army against another's, right? Or maybe an army fighting insurgents. But what if the nation itself starts using the exact same playbook as a guerrilla army?
Yeah, this is a huge shift we're seeing. It's something that honestly, military experts haven't really wrapped their heads around yet. The idea that a government, a whole country's military, would start using the same tactics as a small, scrappy insurgency? I mean, it's like they're writing a brand new rulebook for war.
Okay, so this is the big idea for today: state-level guerrilla warfare. And to be clear, we're not talking about Iran just backing other proxy groups. No, this is about the Iranian state itself planning to fight like an insurgency. It's a strategy that comes from a place of, well, having no other choice. It's designed to just bleed a much stronger enemy, slowly but surely.
But why, you might be asking? Why would any country do this? Why throw out the classic playbook of army versus army? Well, it really boils down to one thing: a massive, staggering imbalance of power. Look, when you know you can't win a fair fight, a head-on battle, what do? You change the rules of the fight.
And these numbers right here, they tell the whole story. We are talking about a nearly 50-to-1 difference in military budgets. I mean, just look at that. It is not even close to a fair fight. And that's exactly why Iran has decided to go a completely different, unconventional route.
And the fallout from this? It's huge. This whole approach is throwing decades of military doctrine right out the window. For the longest time, the assumption was simple: a superpower can just steamroll a smaller country's army. Easy. But this new strategy, it completely turns that idea on its head. Okay, so let's take this from theory to reality. Let's go to the place where this idea isn't just a concept, it's being put to the test right now. We're talking about a tiny little island in the Persian Gulf called Karg Island. It might be small, but it is unbelievably strategic. This is where the theory gets real and potentially very, very deadly. This number you're looking at, it's the whole ball game. $140 million. That's how much Iran makes every single day from oil that ships out of Karg Island. It's not just an asset, it's the country's economic lifeline, their jugular vein. And that makes it ground zero for this entire conflict. So if a conflict were to break out, the US plan for taking this island is, well, it's classic. It's straight out of the Military 101 textbook. You've got paratroopers from the sky, Marines from the sea, lock down the perimeter, and then occupy and control the prize. It's designed to be fast, overwhelming, and decisive. But Iran's plan? It's the complete opposite of classic. They're not trying to meet force with equal force. Instead, they're planning a dense, layered, guerrilla-style defense. The goal is to turn every single inch of that island into a lethal trap. It's all about making an invasion so expensive, so bloody, that the other side has to stop and ask themselves, is this really worth it?
And this is where we get to the heart of the gamble, a really high-stakes game of chicken. The whole American strategy is basically a bet that Iran would never risk destroying its own golden goose. But here's the thing. The history books are absolutely littered with stories of powerful armies making that one fatal mistake, underestimating their enemy's will to fight to the bitter end.
You know, this kind of miscalculation is nothing new. Not at all. And to really get a sense of how things could play out on Karg Island, we actually need to rewind the clock. Look back at a war from over 70 years ago that gives us a pretty chilling example of what happens when you underestimate just how far your opponent is willing to go.
Yep, we're talking about the Korean War. It's such a powerful example. The US jumped in, totally confident they'd get a quick and easy victory. They pushed the North Korean forces all the way back to China's doorstep. And they made a bet, the same kind of bet we just talked about. They bet China would stay out of it. And wow, was that a disastrous miscalculation. It changed everything.
And this is the result. The tragic, awful result of that war. We're talking millions of casualties, unbelievable destruction. And for what? At the end of the day, almost nothing changed. The border went right back to where it was when the fighting started. It's just a brutal lesson in the human cost of getting it wrong.
So when a direct war, like in Korea, becomes too messy or too expensive, what happens next? Well, powerful nations often pull out a different tool from their toolbox. Instead of military force, they switch to a playbook of economic and political strangulation. And there's a really clear example of this when we look at what happened with Cuba.
This playbook usually kicks in the moment a country decides it's not going to play ball with foreign interests anymore. That's a perfect description of Cuba, right? The US was happy to support the dictator Batista, but as soon as he was overthrown by a popular revolt led by Fidel Castro, well, that new government immediately became a target.
And here are the moves. This is the blueprint for how you squeeze a country economically. You label them a terrorist state, you slap on a full trade embargo, you cut them off from the US dollar, which is huge, block their ships, cut off their funding. It's a whole-of-government approach designed to punish and destabilize without ever having to fire a single shot.
This quote here, it's pretty stark, but it really cuts to the core of the mindset that can drive these kinds of conflicts. The idea that the reason for war isn't always about right versus wrong or some grand moral cause. Sometimes the justification is just because we can. It's that old might makes right philosophy in action.
Okay, so let's tie all of this together. We've talked about this new idea of state-level guerrilla warfare, and we've looked at some historical patterns. So what does it all mean for the future? Where are things going from here?
And this, right here, is probably the most important thing to understand. In this kind of lopsided fight, the weaker side wins if it just doesn't lose. Iran's goal isn't to defeat the US military. That's impossible. Their goal is just to survive, to make an invasion so painful, so costly, that eventually the superpower just says, forget it, and goes home. Victory isn't about winning, it's about outlasting.
So I want to leave you with this final question to chew on. As the world changes, as warfare evolves, maybe our very definition of victory has to change too. Are we heading into a new era where it's not about who can win the war, but about who can stand to not lose it for the longest?